Hi there, BookTube. It's Ros from Scully's Angling About the Books.
From Tilly's Shelf. And together we've been working on a project where we study read works of modern fiction, one a month over the course of the year. And this month it's Women in Translation Month, or it historically has always been Women in Translation Month in August. So we have chosen a work in translation by written by a female author and translated by a female translator. That is On the Calculation of Volume by Solvej Balle. Um, and yes, when we say modern fiction, we're talking about books that are published in the 2020s.
Yeah. And it was published in Danish in 2020, and then the English translation by Barbara Haveland came out in 2024. And it was actually shortlisted for this year's International Booker. So yeah, it's a new translation of a newish book. And interestingly, Solvej Balle actually had to self-publish this book initially. And I say interestingly because she's been a writer for years. She published her first novel in 1984. And then she also wrote short stories and poetry. And I think one of her books is available, a big collection of short stories, was translated in the 1990s. But then she basically stopped writing or stopped attempting to publish things for some years, about 20 years. So when she wrote this book, she was sort of out of the loop. And so she self-published the first, it's part of a planned septology, 7 books series.
Quite short. So this one, I mean, you can read it almost in a day.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, like about 160 pages, something like that. So yeah, 7 short books making up one whole, but it does stand alone. But yes, it was taken up in Denmark and recognised as, tremendous, and got a sort of more mainstream publisher, and it's been translated into 20 languages so far. Volume 1 and Volume 2 are available in English at the moment, and 2 more are coming out in November, I think. So it's become a bit of an international sensation. But it's I suppose it intrigues me that it's someone who's sort of come back into being published and then has sort of produced something that is
has made some waves, and I think deservedly so. I would say that the atmosphere of this book is somehow quite spellbinding. And I can really see how, you read it and you think, yeah, there is something pretty good going on here. Even though the premise, like I was explaining the premise to my husband, he was like, do we really need another book like that? Like that's that. I'm sure I've heard that story multiple times, but
no, you haven't heard her version. Yeah. And I wonder if that was why she initially, although her reputation good, why she initially had to self-publish, because I think if you pitched this book or this sequence of 7 books to me, I'd have said, really? So do you want to explain a bit more about what the setup is? Yeah.
So yes, the setup is that there's 2 main characters. There's a woman and her husband, whose names I've completely forgotten.
Tara, she is.
Tara, yeah, because we have it from her point of view. We don't actually have her referring to her name that many times.
No.
So Tara is a trader in ancient books.
It's an antiquarian bookseller and old print.
Antiquarian was the book that was the word that was looking for. So she trades antiquarian books, and she goes away for the weekend to do some book trading, and then she wakes up in her hotel one day and realizes that it's still the day before, and she is caught in, it seems like a time loop, where every morning she wakes up, it's still the 18th of November, and the book is her experience of living the 18th of November again and again for what she believes to be, trying to keep track of it, she believes to be an entire year. So we get the first sort of year of that experience. Is that a spoiler? I suppose it is, because I've just told you that she doesn't get out of the time loop over the course of the year.
Okay, but if there's a 7-book sequence that are built around this, I think it's not a spoiler to say
that she's not just gonna
that it isn't all like sorted at the end of book 1 of 7. So
yeah. Um, yes, and she starts telling her story from the perspective of a little bit later on. So
Yeah,
we work out the journey that she's got to get to this point where she's
yeah,
been in this position for a couple of months.
yeah,
And she talks about how she's learned to adapt to this situation.
yeah,
It's done really beautifully. And what I would say is this year, as our joint reads, we've had a couple of really beautiful pieces of kind of literary speculative fiction. Like Under the Eye of the Big Bird is the other one
yes,
that I'm thinking of. And it's not what I would have expected when we were saying that we were going to be reading modern novels.
yeah,
Like I hadn't really had that category in my mind, but both of these books are books that have really pushed me to think about things and think about,
mm,
how would I interact with those circumstances?
yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah,
just to analyze things a little bit more, I suppose, in different ways.
yeah, yeah. And they're not the sort of book that I regularly read. If you said,
Mm,
"Oh, do you read speculative fiction?" And it's like, well, occasionally,
yeah,
So, and they've actually been some of the best books that we've read. So,
yeah.
which is a lovely thing
And
because I,
another one
yeah,
that we both read this year, We Do Not Part, which
yes,
again, that wasn't for this kind of project, but it's got the similar kind of um pushing the boundaries of
yeah,
reality.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So,
yeah, I do read quite a lot of fantasy and some sci-fi and things like that, but the way that these books have been written and the slightly more literary approach, I suppose,
yeah.
has just opened things up in a slightly different way for me.
Mm, mm, yeah, yeah. And sometimes this sort of how people talk about this book, they say, oh well, like Groundhog Day or whatever, but this is not a book that uses that time loop sort of uh, framework for humor. It's quite a serious book, not humorless and miserable, but but would you say yes,
Yeah, I would absolutely say it's it's got emotional depth to how she kind of
mm,
experiences this situation.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, that you see a lot of her kind of thought processes and how, that this feeling of being so trapped, which
yeah,
obviously applies very closely to her situation, but I think the way that it's written can also be sort of more broadly applicable. This
yeah,
idea of like, being in the same place and maybe not progressing with life the way that you expected it to, and not
yeah,
being able to necessarily relate to the people around you in the same way. And
yeah, yeah.
it works.
Feeling like you're alone
Yeah,
somehow, and that other people don't understand where you are.
yeah,
And it's interesting because I think she doesn't she doesn't set up any kind of explanation of how this has happened. Instead,
mm,
we get Tara worrying about that and wondering about how this happened. And she starts out thinking that there'll be some sort of trick that she's got to
yeah,
work out that will mean she can get back to her
get through,
normal life,
yeah, get out, yeah,
as you would. And then there's a point at which she wonders, well, did I just never wake up? Am I still
yeah,
in that hotel room in Paris dreaming? Yeah. So all the things that you would ask as a reader of this story are the things that Tara is asking
yeah.
herself. You know.
And she goes through a phase where she's going to the library and checking out books on like parallel dimensions and
Yeah.
things, which she kind of refers to that in retrospect of like this was the phase where she was really trying to work it out, but there isn't like a concrete
Yeah.
explanation.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not what you're getting from this book.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I think it works because we're not stuck in one place. We're stuck in one day, but she can move wherever
Yeah,
she goes, wherever she is, where she goes to sleep on the evening of the 18th of November, she will wake again in that place. So she
yeah,
was in a hotel in Paris, but she goes back to the village where she lives with her husband Thomas, and back to her own home, and so that then she's living the days there.
yeah,
And there's this strange thing where some objects sort of something's changed with she personally, she has a burn that heals, her hair keeps growing,
Yeah.
things that she uses up are used up. If she
Yeah.
buys food in the supermarket, it's
And it
not
runs down. Yeah. She starts the supermarket sells out of like her favorite chocolate and things.
because she's buying it
Yeah.
until and it isn't replenished. So and so that throws up sort of issues of like she's thinking about how we, I don't know, how we use things in the world, that there's a lot of kind of, I suppose, if I say philosophical issues that are brought up by this, that again, although it's a serious book, it's not a heavy book, but she's kind of questioning, her I don't know, almost like wastefulness, or you said this sister.
Yeah.
Um,
And like things, there's like little kind of moral questions that come up a lot. Like at a certain point, she decides to um spend some nights in a house that is empty that she doesn't own. And like the feeling of um not exactly stealing, but being somewhere where she shouldn't be. She's not technically allowed to be there, but her being there isn't harming anyone. And she can't progress with like buying a different place because she can't progress. That's the point. And
but that was one of the funny and clever moments, because she realizes that she can speak to an estate agent and go and arrange to visit empty properties legitimately
and find out where the keys are stored and things.
So there's kind of quirky things that are really enjoyable, but there's also some, I suppose it's about the sort of psychology of how would you deal with this, what would you do, and she and that is not, although it's a unique situation and a sort of fantastic one, I suppose the she draws out thinking about how we deal with, she says, I'll quote a little bit, that strange moment when the ground under one's feet falls away and all at once it feels as though all predictability can be suspended, as though an existential red alert has suddenly been triggered, a quiet state of panic which prompts neither flight nor cries for help and does not call for police, fire brigade or ambulance. It's as if this emergency response mechanism is there on standby at the back of the mind. And that's true. And I can think of moments in my life where I've found myself in that place.
Where you're just suddenly sort of alert and
yeah.
One of the most interesting things for me in terms of the way that Tara deals with it as a character is her sort of relentless and uncompromising honesty and how the characters around her respond to that. So she makes this decision, or not, it doesn't even seem to be a decision, that she goes home and she tells her husband what's happened. And obviously every morning he doesn't remember that. So every morning he's like, oh, you're back from Paris. And then she goes back to the same explanation of, I'm stuck in the same day, we're reliving everything. And eventually that becomes so hard that she removes herself from his life and essentially lives secretly in her own home. And that's where we are at the start of the book, is her explaining how she's sort of wound up in this situation where she's the secret. She describes herself at one point as like the monster in the cupboard. And she talks about, if I was to go and see him now, I'd have to throw 151 days in front of him and explain everything that's happened for 151 days. And I was sort of thinking, like, honesty at first makes sense. But she puts herself in this position where she's like, I want to interact with my husband, but I can't because I can't have this between us. But she never thinks, oh, I could just, in the morning, I could call and say, I'm coming back from Paris early, and then just,
have a nice day together.
Have a nice day together, or call an old friend and say, oh, hi.
Oh, your sound's gone funny. Your sound.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, that's better. Yeah.
Call an old friend and say, oh, let's meet for coffee this afternoon. Or she's actually, the first day she sees some friends in Paris and has a really lovely day, but she doesn't think of like kind of repeating that experience. And I found like you can see why you'd kind of be almost a bit mentally paralyzed by the situation at first, but it feels as though she limits herself But I think as the series goes on, the point is that she's going to learn how to open out her world again in the
Surely,
series.
yeah, because you couldn't just rerun what was in this book. It has to be something different. But yes, you and I both had the same thought of, goodness me, we could read every book in the library. We could, but
you could just if you could work out places to stay where the person wasn't gonna, that you weren't gonna wake up with a stranger who was in the bed the night before, kind of thing. If you could work out places to stay, you could just travel. You could go anywhere.
Anyway, do anything.
Or she's got that hotel room in Paris. She could go and see all of the museums in Paris. Anyway, that's just maybe in the next books we'll see her.
We'll see. Who knows? But her relationship with Thomas and her, that feeling of needing to be honest with him, and how she sort of deals with being in the same house with him but separated from him because she's feeling like she can't be dishonest, so she can't keep putting him through the distress of what on earth is my wife talking about, and how it was. And then she talks about being sort of widowed, and there's a little bit where she says she's talks about that, and she says, how do they live in the same houses though, those couples who've been halved? It really hit me quite hard, that bit. How do they go on living the same life year after year in the same rooms with the same day-to-day routine? How do they do it? How do they end doing the same things because the house is the same? Do they sit there and suddenly have the idea they can hear the dead walking about? She's really thinking about, and yes, that bit kind of hit me right.
Yeah, it's quite resonant.
Solar plexus. Yes,
definitely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's good about the book, is how she's able to sort of crystallize those little thought processes.
Absolutely.
One thing I was thinking about, and I think I said to you, is that she's talking that she's the one that's stuck in the 18th of November, but actually it's everyone else who's stuck. If the whole world is reliving the 18th of November again and again and again, her husband doesn't realize that he's doing that unless she tells him. The person on the counter at the shop doesn't realize that they're more stuck than she is, because she's aware that she's stuck. And she's aware of what's going on, so she's got the opportunity to try different things. And I was wondering whether if she does expand her horizons, whether she'll find anybody else in the same, who's caught in the same loophole, that's somehow able to be aware of this. So I read this over 2 days, and I found it so powerful that I dreamed about it, and I dreamt that I was stuck in the same situation, and I was wandering the streets of Paris, and I went into a shop, and the shopkeeper said to me, I know that you're stuck too, and we're both stuck in the same day, because you're the only new customer that's come in. Everyone else does exactly the same thing as they've done every day, but you're
the glitch.
I know that you're part of this society of people who are somehow living the 18th of November differently. I'm very brilliant. I definitely want to keep reading this. I'm very intrigued to see how it's.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to the next book. And seeing how she develops this, and what an interesting writer, and what an interesting sort of thought patterns. So I think it's a warm recommendation from you and me, this one.
Yeah, particularly with how short it is. Just like
anyone can read it.
Do it. Yeah.
And it does stand alone. I mean, it doesn't
feel long and slow.
Yeah,
because
I mean, it feels repetitive, but it's meant to. There's a purpose to that. But and it feels quite rich. And I felt, even though it's short, it covered a lot of ground. And I'm really looking forward to book 2. But it's not like, I wouldn't feel like it's not like it wasn't satisfying in itself. It works. There's a story arc to this book. So so read it.
Yeah. Go ahead. Right. Thank you very much for watching.
And we've got a September book coming up, which is Isola, and I'll put something about that in the show notes. Which is a book it's historical fiction, and I'm looking forward to that. And I'm going to read it promptly at the beginning of September, so I can give the paper copy to you in good time, so we get to do it slightly less last minute at the end of the month. And if you are also reading, and I know, because I know lots of people are, if you're also reading Calculation of Volume, do share your thoughts and your responses in the comments, and because we enjoy that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.